please put your hands together and welcome to the stage, Christina Bellantoni.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and to the Community Foundation of Monterey County for inviting me today and for the opportunity to talk about something that I find very meaningful. So I have given a lot of speeches in nice ballrooms like this, where people are enjoying their dessert and their coffee, and usually this is, real estate investment trust advisors, or maybe executives seeking to navigate some congressional debate, maybe municipal employees trying to find better ways to communicate with their communities. So believe it or not, this is actually my first talk in front of a crowd gathered for something I find myself increasingly devoted to, uplifting women. And I love this idea from the foundation in your programs right there. When a woman thrives, her family thrives. And so what I'd like to talk about this afternoon is an expansion of that idea. While women, especially strong women, can do it on their own, it is better with a village. A rising tide does lift all boats. And the key to that, I'm going to argue today, is using our voices. So when I told friends that I'd be giving this talk, I said that I would be speaking about empowering women across all levels, starting with my strong roots as the daughter of a badass single mother entrepreneur, and then outlining my experience in newsrooms and working now with emerging journalists at USC. And yes, I will say, I've worked in 11 newsrooms, and the one that I oversee now is the nicest, cleanest one of any of those, because we have these great resources at USC. So I was raised in San Jose by a strong woman, by someone who did her best because that's all she ever knew how to do. She was a serial entrepreneur, and being her daughter meant I was along for the ride. That might mean making sales calls for one of her businesses, negotiating payment plans on our utility bills, or even when I was in high school, making and selling chocolate chip cookies to put my mom through community college as she started a new career. And I am actually so grateful to have grown up poor. I knew the value of $1 from a really early age, and I understood that working hard and having a customer service mindset were skill sets that don't come naturally to everyone. And when I think about what I share with, or sometimes shield from, my own children today, I realize that I probably knew way too much too early in age about how vile and difficult the world can be. And I often feel like my mom and I grew up together. She was just 19 when she had me, the product of an abusive home who ended up in an abusive teenage marriage. And while I was too young to know and understand, one of my earliest memories is of her telling me that my own arrival injected the good sense in her to leave, to get her life together, to pursue an education, and to build a better life for her daughter than the one she came into. So we relied on the generosity of strangers and on the social safety net for women who aren't paid any child support. And that instilled in me a sense of paying it forward, and also the importance of government policy at a very young age. 20 years later, when I was the only reporter inside the US Capitol covering the Farm Bill who had actually used food stamps for survival, I realized that I was grateful, that reporters are not born with empathy and understanding, but are a product of their lived experiences. So my mom is a lot of things, but by the time I was old enough to hold a pen, she encouraged me to reach for the stars. Not only that, she propped me up so much that it never even occurred to me that the path to getting there could be challenging, or that I might fail. Because of her confidence in me, I never doubted myself. And my ex-husband actually used to say that my mom was so head in the clouds that if I told her I wanted to be an astrophysicist and travel to outer space, she would not have mentioned the difficulty in achieving this kind of opportunity, let alone the math skills that as a writer I did not possess, but rather would say I had better bring her along. He meant it as an insult, but those very true words actually are the best thing she could ever have done for me, because it turns out the world doesn't treat you that way. A woman working to get ahead is still often viewed with hostility, questioned for who she slept with along the way, underpaid, undervalued, pulled between making a home and making a career. So after my mom, the first person who used their voice to speak up for me is actually one of the reasons I'm here today. So as a UC Berkeley College student and aspiring journalist, I managed to talk my way into a receptionist job at the San Jose Business Journal. And because my mom always taught me I could do anything, I never shut up about wanting to be a reporter. I raised my hand for assignments. I asked and I asked and I asked. And Vicki Bosemock noticed. She gave me a chance. And when I did a good job, she gave me another one. And when I asked for more, she advocated for me in the newsroom. And before long, the professional opportunities before me were pretty good for a 20-year-old. And through that job, I met Dennis Taylor, right here today. And he and Vicki told Janet they thought that I might be a good fit for speaking here. And so here I am. Thank you. I actually talk about Vicki often because of something else she did at the 2 weekly newspapers where she was one of my editors. On Fridays, when the paper came out, Vicki would handwrite a note of praise to someone on the team. Something short, specific, warm. She would leave it on their desk with a kudos bar. These don't exist anymore. I don't know if anybody remembers these. And you felt so honored to get kudos from Vicki. Do you remember that? And when the critiques came, and they did come, I was 20, remember, they were that much more powerful because I already knew she valued me. I knew that the difficult feedback was because she cared enough about me to make me want to be better. That's leadership that makes a difference. And it's so much more than encouraging. It's visionary. It is seeing the best in someone. And during this time of working my first 2 journalism jobs, I was juggling a full-time commute from San Jose to Berkeley to get my degree with volunteer work with the YWCA's Rape Crisis Hotline. I worked the midnight to 6 a.m. shift once a week, and when the call came in, you would go meet the person who had experienced this at the hospital and just be there for them for whatever they needed. You know, it was my way of paying it forward at that time, and that led to serving on the board of Next Door Solutions to Domestic Violence based in San Jose, which does really wonderful work helping women into transitional housing and so much more. And these organizations were badly needed, busy, under-resourced back then. And while I haven't checked up on them in a while, I have no doubt they are in the same situation today. And my son and I volunteered in an organization called Food on Foot, which serves the unhoused population of Los Angeles. Now, he's 9, too young to understand the importance of, kind of where he is financially. He is not exposed to all the same things that I was at a young age, but he's not too young to understand the importance of helping others and showing kindness for all. So from my work alongside Dennis and Vicki was born a passion for politics, and I knew I needed to get to Washington. So I started applying for jobs and building a very, very tall stack of rejection letters. But it never occurred to me to give up or try something else. I was relentless thanks to the voices of my mom and Vicki in my head. I knew I could do it, and I would continue trying. So ultimately, I made it. And I had a wonderful dozen years in the nation's capital, covering presidents, becoming a pundit, writing about scandal and public service, making friends with my friend Jose Vargas, who came down to see me today. And I was able to reach the highest levels of media and government. And what do you know? I witnessed some of the nastiest women-hating stuff you could imagine. A Republican member of Congress who told me I shouldn't live with my boyfriend because why would he buy the cow when he could get the milk for free? A Democratic member of Congress who felt it was okay to put his arm around me while I was trying to interview him about Iraq war policy in front of the entire press corps. Prominent male reporters who you would know, who eagerly shared a nude photo of another prominent reporter and watched everyone laugh about it. True stories, not that long ago. When Nancy Pelosi was in power, no one held back. Don't get me started on how people talk about Hillary Clinton. I started to rise in my career as a senior producer and then editor-in-chief. And about a decade ago, the LA Times called to recruit me to build a new political project that would grow the paper into the future. So I packed up my husband, our cat, our plants, and moved back to my home state and got to work. And I wish I could say that the higher I ascended in my career, the easier it got. But in fact, it was the opposite. I kept encountering people at the peak of power who put so much effort into belittling others, but especially women. I saw gender pay disparities that made my blood boil. In the year 2016, I became the first person ever on the masthead of the Los Angeles Times, at the time the fourth largest paper in America, to have a baby. Ever. It's 160 years old. A top leader at that organization passed me up for an opportunity because I had that breastfeeding thing on my calendar. And yes, I had blocked out 2 20-minute blocks per day to pump, which is something that is legally protected, by the way. So at this LA Times, we started reporting on the Me Too movement, which for a while felt like a reckoning that seemed like it would change everything. As the New York Times and the New Yorker were dropping incredible reporting on Harvey Weinstein, someone who Hollywood had openly identified as a monster for years, my team started hearing that women in Sacramento were ready to talk. The dam broke open, and that year exposed public figures and celebrities, all sorts of bad people. And like everywhere else in the world, it turned out that California's center of political power had been looking the other way for generations. So thanks to the devoted reporting of my team, the LA Times was able to tell the stories of women who found state lawmakers sexually harassing them, and far worse. 2 assembly members resigned following our stories. The bigger picture of the stories was how many people knew about it and how many slaps on the wrist there had been. I also learned a hard lesson during this process. My reporter had built a relationship with a woman who shared just gutting details about how she had been harassed by her boss, a state lawmaker. And as we picked one of the stories apart line by line in advance of publications, part of the editing process, the newspaper's lawyer made the decision that this woman was not credible because she was unemployed. By the way, she was unemployed because she had left politics because of what happened to her. She was too traumatized to return to what her passion was. So we fought the lawyer on that, and we lost. And that's his job, and it's an important one, but I still think it was the wrong call because the reporter had earned this woman's trust, put her through that trauma again by sharing something she had long kept secret about someone powerful, and we never gave her the closure of making that story public. Still, our reporting and the movement's relentless pursuit of truth and justice for countless women are bright moments that I'm very proud to have been a part of. Soon after, another team at the LA Times broke a horrific story about a campus doctor at USC, where I now teach, who had been abusing female patients, especially young international students from Asia, who were far from their families, and many of them did not speak English as their first language. The reporting went on to win a Pulitzer Prize for its impact and yet again exposure of just how many people had known and had done nothing. The 2018 settlement with George Tyndall's victims was at the time the largest in college history until the settlement for the women abused by the gymnastics coach in Michigan. So a few years later, my own students at USC reported extensively on a male campus doctor who had abused hundreds of patients and somehow was not prevented from taking the same role on at UCLA. At the heart of each of these stories were people who were faced with the opportunity to do the right thing and chose to stay silent. The themes were frequently that it was easy to stay quiet, that there was risk to saying something about someone in power. Sometimes it was a fear the abusers would turn on them instead, or that they would never work in that field again. So the heroes who exposed these criminals were whistleblowers and advocates who relentlessly used their voices to speak out and later talk with journalists. Even today you are seeing this. Former Congressman Eric Swalwell had been engaging in, at the very least, questionable behavior for years, and it was among the worst kept secrets in Washington. I also like to point out that it wasn't the media that brought the crimes he is accused of committing to light. In fact, it has been women using technology and social media to directly call Swalwell out to tell the truth about what they have been through. So not only did the media have to play catch up once the story broke on Substack and Instagram, but many news outlets made some poor choices. When video of Swalwell in a hotel room kissing a woman who might be a sex worker surfaced, I noticed when I first saw it that the first comment on Instagram was, "Thank you for having the decency to blur her face." And I thought, yeah, that's nice, I agree with that, great. But then the second, third, 10th, 510th time that video came up in my feed, there she was, fully identifiable profile. The default of the press had been to show this woman as if she didn't deserve to be protected, and that is wrong. Now sure, it is easy to critique the media now that I'm on the other side. As a journalism professor at USC Annenberg now for 7 years almost, I get to think about the big challenges that are facing this industry that I love dearly without actively being steeped in that challenge. And I often say that working in Washington across newspapers, digital, TV, radio, both the left and the right, I really saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that was just on Wednesdays. It makes for a good laugh line, but the gravity and the responsibility of the media cannot be taken lightly because every word choice matters. So here's an example from the New York Times, which I argue is still one of the most important news organizations in the world. They wrote recently that Jeffrey Epstein committed sex crimes with minors in 2008. By using the word "with," just that one word, it suggests to the reader that he had sex with them and that these children consented to that. Adults don't have sex with minors. They abuse them, rape them, sexually assault them. The same story says Epstein would force them to have sex and paid them cash. Those words matter too, because by definition, if someone is being forced sexually, they are at the minimum being abused. You also see this term, underage women, in many publications. These are children, even when they are 17 years old. There is no such thing as an underage woman. She is a girl or she is a woman. Have you ever heard anybody use the term underage man? No. These words send subtle signals that downplay abuse, right? I could fill your afternoon with thousands of other examples, but instead I want to return to the idea of using our voices. So I have the great privilege of working with the next generation of storytellers. I am their teacher and their editor as they learn how to cover the news, and I'm their boss as they navigate being leaders in our student newsroom. So a few years ago, one student told another student, who told another student, who then told me that she had overheard several male students who were my employees ranking the women in the newsroom by their looks. So I called this girl into my office and I said, I was told you overheard this happening. Why did you not come talk to me? Tell me what happened. And her answer was, boys will be boys. And I, white hot anger, hell no. And maybe it's because I was thinking about my own daughter, who is now 5 years old. I would not have it. This ends now, I told her. We cannot stand for stuff like this or it will never change. And for the record, these students denied it. But I had enough testimony and details about what they had said, because she had taken some notes, that I filed a Title IX complaint against them, which is serious in college language, and imposed a consequence on the students who did that ranking. Even though they denied it, I said, you are no longer going to be able to do this thing for the rest of the semester. And I still tell this story to this day when I train my new leaders, because I tell them that I have to know what is going on. Because when I say that my newsroom has no tolerance for racism, bigotry, sexism, harassment, I have to mean it. I have to act on it when it happens, or otherwise, what's the point of anything we're trying to teach any of these young people? And we have good moments and bad ones. So 1 week from today, a young woman I have mentored since her arrival on campus as a freshman will graduate. She held the top job in our newsroom this year as executive editor of Annenberg Media. And when I tell you she is extraordinary, I really mean it. As many of her peers are pursuing lighthearted kind of final projects about, eating your way across LA or how athletes train for their sports, Sophie is doing deep reporting about something known as active clubs, groups of white supremacists who are teaching young men hatred and racism one community at a time. And this is happening everywhere, right here in the Bay Area, literally everywhere. So Sophie is ambitious and talented and has been this terrific partner in this role of this newsroom. And guess what? One of her male peers, someone she considered a friend, called her the B word behind her back. Yes, bitchy, but also bossy. Why? Because she was firmly encouraging the students to do their jobs and report on something important. And Sophie came to ask me what she was doing wrong, how she could tone it down, because sometimes she knew she came on too strong. Again, white hot rage from me, because then she stopped me and she said, how did you manage to triumph in your career? Because surely people said the same things about you. I had to pause my anger, and I thought about this, well, had I though? She had caught me at a bad day. Epstein files had just been released. The women's hockey team had just been totally humiliated in this situation at the Olympics. And I really found myself wondering, how far had women come? But in the end, I told her to keep up the good work. You cannot apologize for being good at what you do or moderate yourself just to make someone else feel more comfortable in their mediocrity. Her best revenge was to continue to be the best model of what leaders should be: strong, clear, goal-oriented. And she is headed in just a few weeks to a prestigious internship with the Guardian's investigative team, one of several offers that she got, besting several students, including the one who called her the name, by the way. I told Sophie, do not be afraid to use your voice. So, when I was at that totally personally confident, not awkward at all age of 13, my mom had worked in food service her whole life, and so she had gone back to school. We'd done this chocolate chip cookie business, and she wanted to learn a new trade, film and video. And now it was time for her to secure an internship. She put on some tie-dye, and she got a cardboard sign, and she wrote, "Will work for film and TV experience." She stood on the side of the road, and she had me take photos of her. I was mortified, okay. But the lesson that I learned from it, because she got the job, was that it was so powerful to put yourself out there. She stood out, she showed creativity and a fearlessness that mattered for her and allowed her to kind of seize that moment. And so that's translated in my own advice to countless others. Speak up, take risks. Maybe that's taking the plunge to ask a question in a press conference held by someone running for president. Maybe it's sharing an idea in a meeting where you fear your voice isn't valued. Maybe it is doing the thing that everyone else says is crazy. Maybe it's reporting some creep doing the wrong thing in the workplace. It could be as simple as asking someone, "Hey, are you okay?" This will take different forms for different people and situations, but the end result is the same. You will not be left wondering what would have happened had you spoken up. You won't beat yourself up over not taking the chance. I teach my journalism students that when they report on a story they need, to use all of their senses. An iPhone recording or ChatGPT transcript will not capture what happened in that interview, the sound or the smell of the sizzling carnitas, or the way a person was nervously rubbing their fingers during the tough questions. And when it comes to protecting women and children, that's pretty good advice too. We can sense when something isn't right, and we owe it to each other and to the better future that we all want to trust our gut and say something. Unfortunately, we know that women and girls are still abused at unfathomable rates, exploited, hurt, trafficked across borders. One person in these situations is too many, and when we say we are standing strong for women and girls, we have to mean it. So don't be afraid. Be courageous. Speak out and call out bad behavior. You made a choice to show up today because you care. You build a village with these people next to you to be that rising tide that can lift all boats. And I'm going to close this out by bringing it back to my mom, who has reinvented herself yet again to open, as you heard, a budgie fitness studio. So somehow, even though I am a grown woman with a career and 2 children, I somehow find myself back in business with my mom again. So I've never been a fitness person, right? I like exercise, whatever, but I got certified. I now teach at least 2 boot camp classes per week, helping our clients feel empowered to try new things with their bodies and guiding people to strength and confidence. And I found that confidence myself, and I love nothing more than getting people to like sweat and laugh and be proud of themselves in our studio. And I've even come up with some original choreography, and I kind of went back and forth on whether I was going to show it while I was up here, or make you do it or something. But one of the songs that I freshly choreographed is Golden, now an Academy Award-winning song from the Netflix movie K-Pop Demon Hunters. I'm hearing some ahas, right? Okay. And 24 hours from now, I will be back in Burbank leading people in my boot camp to this song. And so I'm going to end it with my favorite lyrics that are from this song. So we do flies in the studio, so it's like you fly, and then there's like this freestyle thing, and then we do a move called the Tinkerbell. We kind of close it out. It's very powerful, right? So these lyrics are, no more hiding, I'll be shining like I'm born to be, because we are hunters, voices strong. And I know, I believe, we're going up, up, up. It's our moment. You know, together we're glowing. Gonna be golden. Up, up, up with our voices. Gonna be golden. So thank you for continuing to use your voices to stand strong for women and girls. I will be with you every step of the way. Thanks for being here today.